why do you write poetry? I don't know why. I mean, you know what I mean? Because I am, right?
Right, because I am.
Because I am poetry. I am a poet. I mean, so I think that's like a very interesting thing to, and a very lucky thing to actually have realized. And then I love the fact that like, when you verbalize that, and I was like, yes, that's what it is. You know what I mean? Like a poet as an identity is way more, primal, at least for me. And it is kind of funny because poetry doesn't exist without language, which we don't really learn later.
Yeah.
So we are kind of already doing like this reconstructing and like a weaving of our own tale, like a myth making, like a Joseph Campbell sort of myth making. And I think that's also a part of it. So like, I mean, it is many, many things, but these are the reasons why I think poetry endures for me.
Right,
right. Yeah.
And that reminds, so we're going to bring back Suzanne Lummis because I can't keep her out of the room for some reason. She gave you this quote. You were in a class with her, and you're like, what is the secret to poetry, right? And she's like, I've got the answer. I'll tell you the answer to poetry, right? And she's like, everyone's got their pencils out and they're ready to like write it down. And she's like, know everything.
Exactly. It is one of the best moments of all time because like some people really thought she was going to give you this one trick to being a poet. She's like, it's everything.
Well, she did. That's the trick, yeah.
But that is a trick. I mean, it is literally like just like all the identities just melded together for you to actually become this unique person, right? And then and a unique poet. And like that also brews into your poetry.
Right.
You know? Like right now I'm writing poems that are very action-packed.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I believe that poets grow in and out of their strengths, right? So poets grow in and out of their strengths. Like our strength right now is that we use like maybe medicine to get through. Cheers, by the way.
Use medicine to get through. I know. I mean, this is like...
We're setting ourselves up for judgment, and I'm just fine with that. I like it.
This is like, the hornets, honey that I brew for like 12 hours. So that's what you're drinking.
Well, yeah. Thank you. I love it so much. I'm so glad you brought it. So what I'm thinking is like poets grow in and out of like strengths, right? And so for you and I right now, it's so great to meet you because I think we're on the same page with strengths, which is like story chasing. Like we are all revved up on verbs. And so what I need other poets for then is the constraint and the compression and like the modesty to stop talking, which seems really weird now as we're drinking and talking nonstop, but it's so much fun.
And sometimes, and I don't know if this is true for you, but sometimes I actually do have an opposite problem where and this is like what I usually call like the mood poems, where I actually do wake up with a mood and I just want to capture that.
Yeah.
And I think that's like where I feel a lot of like, I always think about the Marianne Moore quote, poetry is an imaginary garden with real toads in it, right?
Yeah.
So like to actually make the toads real, I started creating this garden, like this imaginary fences, there's like, these plants here, like flowers there. And sometimes that feels like almost like an opposite process where like I'm untangling something that is almost like exists in this abstract. And I think that's one of why a lot of like the poets, I think spiritual poets especially, I think they equate that with like something that's like from like the heavens, right? Like, or like it's kind of spirit, it's like a gift, which I totally understand. The only thing that's I guess like different, I think about both of us is like, we like to mess around with it. Like I just don't think of it as holy. Or maybe I think of it as holy enough that I can mess around with it.
The sacred
Exactly.
Wait, was it the sacred profane? I'm going to say
Profanity.
propane, which is not right. Though it could be more fun than profane. Yeah, the sacred profane.
Yeah.
So, well, will you show me your toads?
Yes. And speaking of toads.
There we go. Aww.
Okay.
If you kiss him, he's a prince. Sorry. That can be edited out. Sorry.
Okay, so this one is called In the Thick Night We Kiss the Flame. The hotel clerk reveals his plastic leg. I wish we were sharing a pale whiskey drink and spilling it in between our laughs. It is not a boisterous laugh. It is the kind of laugh that blankets over wounds. His wound, the accident that took his leg off. Clean off, he says. but everything that followed is messy. This laugh is a kind of crime we do to tragedy when it takes so much from us, the need for control. He can't hold rifles anymore either, he says. The freak accident happened overseas when he was transporting his army buddies to safety. He doesn't dwell on who the attackers are. This is a kindness he shows to the attackers and to himself. And I follow to the edge of his story until he leads me to a place of laughter. We go for another cigarette. I don't really know how many we've shared at this point. The doctor told him there's a chance his body will reject the plastic, a very high chance. In these situations, the topic always turns Godward. Neither of us believe in a singular entity, but we like the word miracle, and we stay with it. He asks if I know any jokes that he can tell his 11-year-old niece. I tell the dirtiest joke I know, just to be a prick. His laughter is a blood cry. Then suddenly, as if I were a mother, I pray for the health of her heathen son, or for him to find a good woman. In the middle of us all is a cigarette butt whose flame refuses to die.
I love this poem. I love this poem. I mean, it's right up my dark alley.
And I actually, this one really is like in line with like what you mentioned about like how us being story chasers, because like this one, sometimes like people actually tell me stories and people, and that feels like a gift to me. I mean, and it's like when people are just like suddenly willing to open up to me for no reason. And this was an actual hotel clerk who was telling me his life story when I was in Santa Cruz, and two of us were like the only ones that were awake. And when I was like, trying to smoke a cigarette outside, he just came up to me. And then within, I think an hour or two, I was like inside the hotel lobby, like looking at this plastic leg, which kind of is like, if you actually look at it from the outside, it's a very absurd situation too. So like there is like an absurdity sort of involved there. But like when people actually say things like that, I'm like, I just cannot pull myself away. I'm like, tell me more,
Yeah. I am like curious about that because I do think like story lovers sort of like wear it somehow. Like I don't know how people can tell, but like I've it's like the curse and the blessing of it, right? Like people have like since I was little just wanted to tell me stories, and then I get to a point where I'm like, I'm supposed to do something with this, right? Like it feels like this great gift. And then what I also like about your work, honestly, is it does this neat thing. So I think what everyone's kind of looking for in life is like love and acceptance, of course. I'm not sure those things exist, but they're looking for love and acceptance, right? And so what's interesting about that is we're usually two people simultaneously, the person that we know we are and kind of ashamed of, and the person we aspire to be, which is oftentimes out of our reach. And we're just sort of vibrating between those two things. So really good friends and lovers and all those other things are able to kind of be in that in-between space where they're like, I know who you dream to be, and I know who you are, and I'm still here, and I can see both at the same time, right? And I feel like your poem does that, right? Like here's this warrior, like he wants to be seen as this strong, able figure, and like there's also this like incredible vulnerability, which is a strength on its own, maybe stronger than being, I don't want to say stronger than being a soldier, because that's like, it's hard. There's different types of soldiers, right? There's different sorts of wars, right? There's the war that you fight in and the war that happens after, right? And you have this great way of going into this sort of like, story world is like dream dimension, but you bring in the fluids and the body parts and the, you know what I mean? Because I think camp does the same thing, right? Like it kind of operates in this almost like fairy tale space, like horror films, John Waters, like all those things that are sort of like absurd, maybe surreal, even though it's absolutely real, like right? So it kind of fluctuates in that middle point.
It's like that time and space that we live in is that exact moment where tragedy hasn't quite turned into comedy yet. It's that little magical moment of transformation. So it is still transforming. It is an ing. It is in the presence. It is still doing something.
It's verbing all the time.
Exactly. It's verbing all the time. Exactly.
You don't even need a verb. It's doing it. It's a verb all on its own,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. So like there's no stasis. And I think like camp is in fact that. I mean, there is something about it that can even seem chaotic because there's like when it's supposed to hit you with tragedy, it hits you with absurdity instead. And like, so like it kind of switches like this comfort level of like where you can really place your emotions.
I'm definitely a process poet. So I have a before writing process where I make some sort of visual art that like kind of keys in or makes it tactile, like whatever it is I'm writing about, so that it's like image based rather than like abstract thought based. And then also I've been working with like a whole bunch of great writing groups. One of them is yours.
I would like to claim it's mine, but it's a communal property.
Our communal,
exactly.
Yeah, like any good groups are, just exactly. A little bit socialist. So, well, that was too much. But anyways, yeah. So I've been working with a group like on the editing process, and then also I've been working with Ron Kirchie on the editing process, and he is so smart because he's always like, cut it in half, right? Like whatever it is that you've put on the page, that's the raw material. But poems like to feel sculpted, like they like to feel loved, right? And like that energy of the edit goes into it. And I think that's such great advice. So don't edit too much of the raw energy, which is what you taught me. And then Ron taught me like clean it up a little bit, right? So I think that's good advice just when you leave your house in the morning. Sorry.
It's a little like Coco Chanel sort of thing. Yeah.
Or something maybe a little less pricey, but something like that. Okay. So being with plants, an Eventbrite meditation workshop via Zoom, a collaboration with houseplants. What do you observe about the way your plant friend is living in the world? Online shopping provides me with so much undressing. How could we not be turned on? The most expensive leaf I owned died. A half-moon pink princess is now yellowed and freckled with decay. The leaf itself is worth $250, an unfleured electric pink. I still have the plant that could resell now, possibly, for $20 as a reverted princess. The opposite of being noble is insignificance. Yeah, I Googled that too. When I found out my pregnant student was walking the stroll, I drove my toddler until I found her between the corner of midnight and 1 a.m. Gave her $50 to go home and write her paper. She said I overpaid her. What can you learn from your plant friend? I want to go back to school so badly I wake up wet. It has been years since someone was paid to slaughter my name. I have about 200 houseplants at the moment. A symptom of quarantine, maybe? My Alocasia zebrina is especially special to me because when overwatered, it weeps. All the names of plants are on YouTube, and I practice them with plant fluencers. Alocasia zebrina. None of them ask to be these names. I read plants like music. My son pretends the TV remote will work on me, exaggerating the push of the button until he looks like a virtuoso at a mini piano. What made me think silence had any use for me? Every day the same song. Despite me, please do not die, but grow. What possibilities might they open, and what tender spots might they touch? They all had their own apothecaries. When she said down, he said up, and the third between couldn't digest the difference. She died. OD most likely. Beds merge your bodies, bones, and blood are hard to unlearn. I needed a place to stay. This couple said they had an empty space in their threesome bed. I go years without touch. Can't keep up with apathy and all its accidental orgasms. Too sensitive, people tell me about me. After her funeral, they went to Amsterdam for a prostitute to fill their cold spot, but the girl was bought out from under them. Plant auctions are the same. If you hesitate over ethics, you'll miss a Hoya. Hoya heads know not to wait. What if I die, this born-again virgin I did, but didn't choose to be? I give all my impulses to eBay. My last lover told me, all you have to do is believe it means nothing and we can fuck forever. They say a plant can live indefinitely, given the right circumstances. I wonder, as I divide and subdivide for propagation, if life feels alive when removed from the forest. Did I fuck up forever, trying to mean something? And that's it. Other than there's a footnote. So the section questions actually came from poet Mega Kaminsky, who's an amazing eco-poet who leads a workshop of like eco-poets who don't write poems to people, but write poems to plants. So I think
that's amazing.
I know I'm not that invested. Like I've got this sort of like human narrative with my plants that I really love, but I'm not to the point where I'm writing them books of poetry. So.
I mean, that definitely sounds like another level of enlightenment that I haven't achieved yet, you know? But like, I really love the idea to actually want to be so immersed in nature that like you're trying to actually talk to nature in its own language. Great idea, you know?
Yeah.
But obviously I love your poem because like there's so many human stories that get intertwined, you know? And like any good poem, and a lot of your poems, I mean, like when I actually listen to them, I just get filled with so many ideas, you know? And that's always amazing. And like, it's just like, it's not only just like the unexpected jumps, but like how like the plants in parallel have these like almost human counterpart stories. And for each plant-based questions that you prompt that really gave a rose to like these sections, you're really telling these complicated story, yet at the same time juxtaposing them in a way where I'm feeling the empathy for both the plant and the people in them. You know, so like that's where like I just feel like it's very amazing, you know, what you do.
Jerry.
Yeah, and it's like the jumps are like, you know, it's like it feels natural, and like that's I think one of the hardest thing to pull off. And you mentioned Ron Kirsch earlier. I mean, he is a master at like making things look so simple. I know that comes with the greatest of mastery, right? It's like the fact that to make it look as if like it didn't have any effort put into it, you know? And that's, I think, what you talked about, the editing process as well, is the fact that like, no, like, yes, things need to be tightened and sculpted, but when it's actually said, it feels almost as if like you just created this magical poem just in your head in this conversation right now. And that's what I feel about that, your poems, you know, and that poem in particular, because it's just so amazing. The leaps are amazing and they're natural.
Oh,
you know?
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I doubt that anyone can see this on camera, but I tried to like show the red marks, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this, like the constraint of compression is so awesome, right? Because like you don't want to wear out the reader, which I think I could easily do. You know what I mean? Because I get so caught up in the energy of things. I'm like, and like I think this is why we are such good poetry friends, you know, or friends in general, is we're like story chasers. And so we love the energy. And so all the detail that goes into even finding where that story is located, like is part of the ride, you know, like, so, I mean, I feel that way when I read your work. Like you have like poems where people are in cars, or there's like a car accident, or like someone's leaping off of a balcony. Like there's this incredible movement, right? And so you can feel in the poem as it's being written, the chase after the content. And so, I mean, to be so people focused, that's not everyone's flavor, right? And so I try really hard to go out and find the other flavors in the world, because I could just stay in this dirty little place with dirty little humans, you know?
Exactly.
So I needed something clean like plants, right? Or nature, which is kind of dirty too, but not as dirty as us. And I was thinking, I think her name is Sierra Nelson. That just like popped into my mind, her work. And what she does is she'll get like a little spider, like she'll get like a house spider or some sort of spider that she finds, and she puts the spider in a mason jar, and she puts that mason jar on top of like a series of words, and she lets the spider co-author the poem with her, so wherever the spider moves is the next word of the poem. Right?
That's pretty amazing.
I know, it's also kind of interesting to sort of play around with like,
it's like a spider Ouija board almost.
Yeah. Like this sort of like, I can feel where the poem is going to go, which I know like we're just name dropping right now, but like I think so many poets like actually contributed to you and I finding our voices and like feeling like we have a home in it.
Definitely.
So we talk about Suzanne Lummis like that all the time. Like you like have her edit a poem. I swear she doesn't read it. She just like gets her bracelets and her nails and she's like,
she feels it.
Yeah.
And she feels like the pulse of the poem.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's like you're witnessing when she's editing it, like right in front of you too. Yeah, like, it's like a very like almost like a mythical sort of like thing that she does. And she does it like amazingly well. I'm glad that you mentioned her because like that's actually what you said talked about movement in the poem. And one of like the big lessons of that I got from Suzanne, among many, is give your character something to do. Don't let your character or whatever that is, that can be like, a plastic bottle for God's sake, but like give it something to do. Don't let it sit there. It's not like, like a still life portrait. You know what I mean? That's not what you're trying to do. Have it do something. And I think that's where like the power of like verbs and actions or like even like the surrounding and, where the story actually is. And I think the story is, at least for me, is in the action. In fact, you're talking about the before writing process that you mentioned, and I love that so much that how you describe it. You need something tactile. You need something existent, something in your hands that you can touch, or like taste or whatever for you to actually be able to write or start the poem. And I believe you actually made a dress that actually goes with your poem, or it was a creation that inspired the poem, or
yeah. I knew that the poem was brewing, but I needed something physical to get me there. And I mean, this comes from a couple beliefs. Like one of the best advice I got about writing poetry is like, don't worry about writing a poem. Worry about being a poet. Like live the life of a poet, and then the poems will become your product B. Like it'll just like, and then what that allowed me is it gave me permission to do things and live experiences that I never would have given myself otherwise.
It's kind of Rilke too, if you think about it.
It's totally Rilke. I mean, it's like all of like, there's like a whole little group of people like that. Like my favorite poet of all time, I'm going to name drop again because he's so important to me. Craig Arnold, very experiential poet, and he did this thing where he wrote a book about a woman who was possessed by a demon. It was a symbiotic relationship because the demon had her go out and live all this life. And then the demon, because he was inside this human body, could feel remorse. And I'm like, if that's not the definition of living the life of a poet, I don't know what is, right? And so some of the things I've done, like I let people bury me alive in different capacities for 2 years to write The Walled Up Wife.
The first hour of being buried alive in the walls of a half-built cathedral. A sky is eaten by clouds.
For In the Circus of You, I created my own community circus where like I put on a circus that was really just about poets who, lovingly are kind of a sideshow.
Yeah, and also I've seen pictures of it, and I've seen your amazing dress. Those are all your creation, right? Everything that you were wearing.
Yeah, I work
Poetry
with.
Circus.
I like to work and like collaborate with other people, but sometimes I make my own dresses, and I made this dress. So I'm gonna go ahead and just show you my dress because
perfect.
Because I never got over show and tell as a kid. I still have my own fridge art on the art, like the fridge. So some things you never get over. So this is like a vintage dress, of course, from Palm Springs, and for some reason that seems so exciting to me. And so the first image, I was originally painting Elizabeth Taylor because she is like the dream girl of camp. Oh my gosh, thank you, Andy Warhol, for giving us another side of Elizabeth Taylor. I would have been so sad without that. So she kind of turns into this like clown-like figure. And the whole thing says like, sure, a dream, but a person too, which I also think is what camp does. Because like Elizabeth Taylor was just like this untouchable goddess until Andy Warhol got a hold of her and like, we only want to say what he did with her on film, right? But she did it so well. So I was really excited. I got this from a Goodwill in Palm Springs. And I actually asked them to remove the tag and put an extra small tag on it because that's the closest I'm ever going to get to my ideal weight. No one will know. The tag says I'm extra small.
That is so ingenious. That is ingenious. I actually know people who do that in real life.
Really? Yeah, just like sew out?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I think I'm just going to start leaving tags on all the time with like...
And like that actually... Well, I mean, that's amazing because like that speaks to the constructed reality that we live in.
Oh, sure. Like we
know?
talk about this a lot, like social media being like sort of like the greatest editorial process ever. So you become this almost like ghost presence. Meanwhile, like your normal dirty self is over here.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And like, again, camp brings those two things together, right? Like you can be the ghost and you can still be chunky Elizabeth Taylor at the same time. All right, so these turn into, it's actually almost like a child's flip book. And so if the person is right here, right, then they get masked in a different sort of space. And so this one says, I don't know what to tell you, sweetheart, right? And then it comes down here, it says, you don't have a name. I don't know what to tell you, sweetheart, you don't have a name.
That's amazing.
Isn't that such a Hollywood, that's like dating actually feels like a rehearsal here, right? So it's like, I don't know what to tell you, sweetheart, you don't have a name.
Also, it's like, I almost feel like that's like the kind of line that like, it could have been featured in Chinatown or something like the great noir films.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Elizabeth Taylor continues onward in her own beautiful way. And then it ends up with like this larger sort of like, I mean, it's definitely getting into that like Judith Butler sort of drag. Like the failure of heterosexuality is that it's a bad drag show. It's a very bad drag show.
Exactly. So it just doesn't go far enough. I mean, in terms of gender performance or gender exaggeration.
Yeah, it doesn't take it too far. So then it's not fun.
It's not fun.
It's not fun. If you're going to get dressed up, let it be fun.
Yeah, it takes itself way too seriously.
Yes,
the
it does.
Gender performative aspect of it. Yep.
Fashion takes, well, I don't want to say that. That's too far. I love fashion.
I do, but like, you can definitely see some of like the fashion shows and like some of the outfits, I laugh because like that's a designer having fun.
Yeah.
That is not something that's made to be for practical wear.
And it's like theater, right?
Yeah, so like I'm not supposed to sit here and revere it. I'm supposed to have fun with it too.
No, totally.
You know what I mean?
And I like when the different mediums, of course, mash up. Obviously, I like that, right? So I like when you can't tell if it's a poem, if it's theater, if it's fashion, if it's like, I like to confuse people. That's not the way to success, kids. Just so you know, if you want to be a successful poet, don't confuse people. But if you want to have a really good time, you should sew a little nun into your vagina crotch in a dress and just really let that one ride itself out, right? So,
and I love the fact that like it's this like big mask and crown going on.
Yeah, and then underneath,
the big reveal is a little nun on the crotch area.
Yeah, do you see these little kids? I mean, I don't want to make too much commentary about the Catholic Church, but like also this like conflict of what you're supposed to do down there, right? Which is an old thought, right? Like the virgin whore or whatever, you know what I mean?
But an enduring one.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It is an enduring
because it's fun, because it hums in between two places, right?
And it is ever changing, in fact, because like the whole Virgin Mary and the Mary Magdalene dichotomy has existed for like a very long time, but like, and it seems as if like where we place women in actually determines a lot about the society. And why wouldn't it? I mean, more than 50% really of like the population is women, so how could it not have a, actual tangible effect on like, I think the fabrics.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to expand that out to just femininity in general,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly,
it's which even makes it larger than half the population,
right?
Exactly. So,
so
then we have some handprints on here, which is like, is it like, I don't know, like what is violence and what is pleasure? And I'm not quite sure where that line is.
I also got the issue about consent.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I got, like from like the handprint, and because it was blood red, you know what I mean?
You're so smart. You should just walk around with me and explain me all the time. No, I'm sorry, Sharon. No one wants to do that, but it'd be so much fun.
God, it would be like a walking exhibition, and I can be like the tour guide.
Yeah. Oh my God, I have to get up off my knees, which is really awkward because I did nothing wrong, but I'm gonna have like knee like imprints now. Like, oh my mic. Okay, we made it. We did it. Woo!